Yo, yo, yo. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show. My name is Kirk Barrett, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices ever. And I got a great episode today. I have Dave Monahan from Kleer. Now, I'll tell you this episode is a unique one because I got some inside information. It was actually a slide that was exposed to me in one of our meetings, and I said to the Kleer rep, I gotta have that. And so I reached out to Dave really quick and I said, Dave, can we do a podcast on this? It's some very, very helpful information. If you're a dentist and you're trying to figure out what these plans mean to your practice financially, you're going to want to listen to this episode. And we will include JPEGs of these slides. It's awesome information to help you create a better practice and a better life. So check it out. Hope you enjoy the episode. We'll see you soon. Hey guys, welcome to the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all over. And have you ever thought to yourself, gosh, this game of dental insurance and really kind of understanding how we can optimize coverage for our patients, it's just very complex. Well, I'm with you. I don't quite understand it either. And that's why we have a good friend of ours, Dave Monahan from Kleer. And if you haven't seen this guy on any of our podcasts before or our masterclass, you're missing out. Not only is he crazy smart, he's got a very cool company, but he also spends a lot of time helping us understand this complex game of insurance and that side of things. But it's not always about that. It's about helping dentists reclaim their freedom. We're going to talk about that in a second. He also runs this company called Kleer, K-L-E-E-R, and they have created the coolest membership platform for dentists. And we'll talk about that in a second. But Dave, I can't thank you enough for being on. I always love having you on. So thank you for being on again.
Oh, thanks for having me, Kirk. I'm not sure if I can live up to that introduction, but I'll try.
Oh, you will. Don't worry. You totally will. And I appreciate and enjoy our conversations a ton, but I always want to start with this in case we've got a lot of young listeners now. We got a lot of dental students listening. And I want them to know who you are. You're a regular guest here, but who are you before we get into this important topic?
So if I had to say who I am, I came up through engineering. I was a technical guy, worked on a bunch of good tech stuff, defense electronics and things like that, but then moved into the commercial side and worked for Microsoft for a number of years back in the heyday of Microsoft, where it was a little crazy. Bill Gates was there and all that good stuff, a lot of fun. And then moved off and started two of my own companies. One I sold back in 2016, and then I sort of accidentally got into the dental space. So a friend of mine owned 6 dental practices. I was planning on taking time off after selling my other company, and he talked to me about everything that your audience knows, how difficult it was to do two things. One was to deal with insurers, and two was to get patients to come in more often. So I looked at that. I had no experience as far as understanding those dynamics. I always went every 6 months, like I thought everybody did, but learned that 50% of people don't do that, and that dealing with insurance is expensive, complicated, and just a lot of times not worth the time. So I decided to dig in, spent 6 months researching the dental space, saw an opportunity to get rid of the dental insurance middleman, and so created Kleer to do that.
Yeah. And it's fabulous what you guys have done. Now, I'm going to brag on you for a little bit, but your core purpose is not to slam insurance companies. It's really to help dentists with freedom. That's actually one of my most, there's so many things I appreciate about you guys, because a lot of people can come into this space and quickly they just paint insurance as becoming, the enemy. Now, we're going to point out some things that are clear. It's data driven, but your job or your core purpose is to what? Can you share that?
So we have two purposes completely interlinked. So one is, we call it liberate dental care at a high level. And what does liberate dental care mean? It really means, one is giving power and control back to the dentist, right? And taking it away from people who are third parties in the middle, right? Who, make things more complex than they need to be. And so that a dentist can run a dental practice to the highest clinical standards, right? While also on the other side, giving patients coverage so that they can get the care they need. And so
Right.
in our market research, we saw both of those things: frustrated dentists and dental practices who couldn't, were basically at the whim of third parties. And we saw patients who couldn't get access to the care they wanted because things like, when you think about a patient, they really have two options. They can buy dental insurance, which when they look at that, very complicated 20 page agreement, it's very difficult to understand, if they're going to get the value out of them, they're expensive. Then on the other side, they can go without coverage, but being a patient without coverage is scary. And so they don't have any idea of how much things are going to cost. So they stay away from the dentist. So we wanted to marry those two things under Liberate Dental Care, give dentists control and give patients better access to the care they need.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely doing it, and you guys are going to love this today as you listen to this. And, I sent you, in full transparency, because that's just how I roll, I sent you an email because I was talking to one of your team members, and I asked your team member, can I take a screenshot of that? Because, and he's like, yes, you can. And I thought it was privileged information. I sent, and it is, we're going to reveal it today in some respects, but, and I sent it to you and I go, we got to do a podcast on this. And you're like, yeah, absolutely. So, but before we do that, again, let's go back to this. Let's talk about the why. Understanding and optimizing your coverage options. Why is that so important? And where are we going today?
So what we do, just to talk about the data we're going to discuss, as part of what we do, we don't want to just slam a membership plan into a practice. Like you said, slam insurers and like sort of whatever, rough our way through things. The net is we want to understand. We want to make sure we understand what's going on in a dental practice and making sure we're helping a dental practice move forward. So this whole idea, the concept is first understand what coverage options you're providing to patients and and then measure the impact those coverage options are having on your practice and also on the patient's behavior. So at a high level, most practices, I know there's fee-for-service practices out there, but most practices have fee-for-service patients and insured patients, right? Mm-hmm. And what you're seeing more and more of is membership plan patients. So in our view, at a high level, 80 or 90% of patients are going to either be PPO, they're going to be membership plan, or they're going to be completely uninsured or fee-for-service. And so the question becomes, okay, what's happening to those three patient sets, right? What's the patient behavior? What's the performance of those patients within the practice on production and collections, on recall and all that good stuff? And what's really, really interesting, Kirk, and we're going to dig into this, I know, is the dynamics are very different across those three coverage options. So the hard part about this is trying to understand that, getting the data and looking at the data and figuring out how those patient sets are all behaving within your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys, again, you're going to love this because you've dispelled a lot of myths. I love this. You've broken it down into 3 buckets. We're going to understand the options. Number 2, look at the performance in the data. And number 3, look at the patient's behavior, because some of these times we don't even consider the patient's behavior. As a fee-for-service dentist, one of the things you've always helped us understand is, you think everybody's coming in every 6 months, but the data doesn't show that. And so the whole idea of this podcast is one thing. It's just to make your practice better. So I hope if you're listening, take a couple notes and pay attention to this. And Dave, let's go right into it. So I've got your 3 slides. Which one do you want to go to first?
Why don't we start with just the profile slide, because it'll give everybody an understanding of what the data we're going to look at is.
Okay.
So if you have that slide up.
I do.
Awesome. So what we do as part of our service is, once a practice is on our platform, typically we want to wait about 6 months so they get some members on. We have some data of how those patients are behaving underneath a Kleer membership plan, and then we'll pull their practice management data. And what we'll do is look at how those different groups are behaving: fee-for-service, PPO, and Kleer. What we've done this for a lot of practices, but this is just one practice we just did recently. And I know you were on a call, you saw this data and asked me if I would present it. And so we said, absolutely. So it's a 5-office, 15 dentist practice. Now, some of your practices might be saying, well, I'm not a group practice or multi-location practice. That's fine. This data is consistent, independent, small group, large group. We have all the data across lots and lots of practices, incredibly consistent. This just happened to be one we did recently. They were in network, or still are in network, with 12 PPOs. We think there may be more, but that's as far as the contracts we could find. It's interesting when you talk to the practices, and just trying to dig up the contracts and understand where they're in network with is also very interesting. But anyway, we've identified 12. They had their own sort of in-house membership plan that was paper-based. And the net was they were getting a little frustrated with it. It was getting too big. It was hard to manage it, right? They didn't have any central area to really sort of measure results, improve, their performance. Renewals were like a mess. They weren't automated. They had compliance, questions. I wasn't sure if they were compliant or not compliant, but that is, they were worried, and a bunch of other things. But they wanted to move away from that. Right. And so we launched Kleer there in May of 2020. And the net was they created 3 care plans, a child, adult, and then adult plus, which is really a perio plan. They, as of just yesterday, they have 743 members. It's really cool is looking at the subscription revenue. So they have over $200,000 of recurring subscription revenue that comes into their practice. Yeah, that grows obviously as they add members. That's just going to keep growing. But think about it, that's just money coming in the door. It's not going to a third party. It goes straight to them into their bank account. And then, and we'll show the data in a minute, their patients on the platform, on the Kleer platform, spent about $1.2 million a year on other treatment. That's in addition to the subscription revenue. So the subscription revenue will cover things like cleaning, exams, x-rays. In addition to that, treatment-wise, obviously you got everything else. And so that's about $1.2 million of treatment. And people always ask us about payments and things like that. They have 0 past due. It's all been paid.
So, okay, so you got my attention on these now. I also want you to talk about the annual subscription revenue. While that's not like the goal, it is really important to point that out. That pays a lot of bills. That pays a lot of rent. It also creates the stability for your practice long term. And then can you talk about the relationship between the annual subscription revenue and the treatment revenue? I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings that dentists have,
Absolutely. So, yeah, let's talk about subscription. And subscription has multiple value components to it. So first, on average on our platform, a patient pays $345 in annual subscription to a practice. That's our average on our platform. And so that is, and for that, they get their cleaning, exams, x-rays. And obviously that's a discount. Maybe that's a $400 or $500, typical fee if somebody came in and paid full price for that. But what ends up happening, think about the patient for a second. So these patients are fee-for-service uncovered. They don't come in very often, right, without coverage. So you mentioned in the beginning, like a lot of people think they come in every 6 months. They actually come in once every 2 years on average. And we have all the data that shows that. And practices are always very surprised by that. But that's the average that we see. But anyway, when they buy a subscription, they come in 2 to 3 times more often, right? So you're not just getting that subscription revenue. They're also coming in for, obviously, for their recare. And where does treatment come from, right? Outside of recare, it comes from sitting in the chair, talking to the hygienist, talking to the dentist. 75% of all, non-preventative care treatment comes from coming in for recare. So the net is that treatment revenue, just to explain that, that's from them sitting in the chair, talking to the hygienist, talking to the dentist, and accepting fillings, crowns, right? And so on and so forth. It's the other things outside of the preventative care that they're accepting. So you have to add those 2 things together. So you have this recurring model of people paying subscriptions year in and year out, and they're coming in 2 to 3 times more often, and they're accepting twice the amount of treatment as they normally would. And that's what that treatment revenue is.
Yeah, and I'm going to beat this drum forever, and I don't care if we say it every single time. Like, a lot of great businesses have figured this out, that the membership fee is just the retainer. It's the sticky piece, like Disney Plus. You could probably talk, we pay $7.95 a month for Disney Plus, and they have come out and said, we don't need the $7.95. We care about taking good care of a community. Bezos knew this when he was growing Amazon. We need members and talk about the data. Like, this is not new. You're not coming to dentistry and going, hey, this is new. These are recurring patterns of really solid businesses in the world that you're applying in dentistry, correct?
Absolutely. So if somebody wants to get up to speed on this, there's a book out there called The Membership Economy. It's now getting aged, but it studies companies in all kinds of industries, and they compare companies that offer subscriptions or memberships versus companies that don't. And the average across all the industries is, if you are a part of a membership or a subscription, you buy twice as much as somebody who is not. That's the key. And it's not that some people would say, well, why are they buying twice as much? Aren't we sort of taking more from them than what we should? And the net is no. the patient in our example wants more care. They're just afraid of costs, right? They're afraid of not having coverage. They're afraid of not getting a good deal. And so they're timid about coming in, or when they're in their chair and you're saying you should get this treatment or that treatment, they're skeptical. They're not, sort of bought in. But the membership gives them access to the care they want and makes them more comfortable accepting treatment that they want. So normally, if they don't have it, they're not accepting it, but they're walking out your door saying, I should have gotten it, right? But I was afraid. I don't know how much it's going to cost, or it's going to cost too much. It's like you're giving them the avenue to get the care they want.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that is critically important. Now we're going to go into the granular level and take a look at how this all breaks down. And I've got your second slide up here, which was, if you guys are listening, you can check this out. And we'll post this online so you can go right down to the show notes. We'll put a little image in there so you can check this out. But this was what I actually sent Dave. And if you're watching the video, you can see it's right on screen right now. But Dave, tell us what we're looking at. It's the slide that says Kleer versus uninsured and insured patients. This blew me away.
So just to give you a high-level macro view, so of the 5 practices I mentioned within this group, they asked us to look at 2 of the practices. So these were the 2 that they were a little concerned about. Was it working? Was it not working? And so they asked us to look at these 2. So this is the culmination of those 2 practices data from the practice management system, straight off the practice management system and sort of consolidated. So the first column, patients, straightforward. So they have 363 Kleer patients. That's of the 743 or so across all 5 practices, but 363 of them were in these 2 practices. Uninsured, there's 2185 of those, and then insured, there's 5632. So insured is just any patient that has a PPO. And we're going to get to that in the next slide as far as the different PPOs in this practice. But it just gives you a breakdown of their patient sort of coverage, right? So we talked about in the beginning, what coverage do they have? And so the second column, visits. So this is the average number of visits per patient under each one of those plans on an annual basis. So on average, Kleer patients are coming in 3 times. So not just the 2 recare, right? They also came in for at least 1 more. So they're coming in for other treatment, right? The uninsured, on average, came in twice. That's not bad. I'm going to get to something in a second about those uninsured, but they were doing pretty well getting their uninsured patients into the practice. What you're going to see, though, is they were doing a really bad job of getting them to buy things and get treatment. Right. So anyway, there's 2 visits per uninsured patient. And then insured was 2.3. So you can compare the 2. You just see in the green, like the Kleer patients came in 1.5 times more often than uninsured and 1.3 times more often than the insured. So they were coming in more often, 50% for uninsured and 30% for insured. And what we see, by the way, typically across practices is Kleer patients and insured patients come in very close to each other. Kleer is usually a little bit more, but not a lot. And it makes sense. They both have coverage, right? And so they're coming in. The uninsured typically don't come in this often. They're actually doing a really good job of getting their uninsured coming in. Usually we see that like at 1. So 2 is actually doing really well. All right. Procedures. So this is number of procedures that were accepted by each patient set. So you can see Kleer, 6.7 procedures were accepted. So uninsured, 3.2. So they're coming in twice, but they're only accepting 3.2 procedures versus 6.7. So the Kleer patients are accepting twice the amount of treatment as those uninsured. And then insured, again, not far off of Kleer, right? 5.8 versus 6.7. So the Kleer patients are accepting 20% more. But again, pretty close. We typically see that pretty close to each other. The uninsured at 2.1 is dead on our average. Like Kleer patients will accept twice the amount of uninsured patients. Yeah. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So what's the production at UCR? So at full fee, how much are they, production are they creating? You can see Kleer, $1,873, uninsured, $696.
That's crazy. Like that is just crazy. So tell what's your hype? I mean, you know the hypothesis. Give us a little bit more perspective behind that.
It's this simple, Kirk. I'm telling you, it is this simple. By having a subscription and a membership, right, there's 2 things going on. One is they're paying you a subscription for that. Yeah, right. So you're getting paid. If the patient doesn't show up, I don't want this, but the patient doesn't show up, you're still getting paid through the subscription, right? So you have this sort of backbone of subscription revenue coming through for Kleer patients. More importantly is what I talked about before. They're coming in for their hygiene visits. And when they're in for hygiene, they're accepting treatment. It is that simple. And that number over uninsured is typically 2 to 3 times more. They'll accept 2 to 3 times more treatment than they would if they're uninsured. And that's what they're right in that mark, 2.7. And it's that whole thing about being comfortable. I have coverage. I'm getting some type of discount. I'm more trustworthy of the practice, right? It's transparent. I can see pricing, like all that works to get the patient to come in and accept treatment.
Yeah.
And then the other thing interesting, though, Kirk, is looking at production at UCR for insured. So it's showing 1267, right? That sounds great, right? So they're, Kleer is still 50% more. 1267, though, is better than 696 for the uninsured, right? So their insured are accepting more than uninsured. But look at collections for insured, right? So they did 1267. They only collected 686.
That is crazy. My first thought is I got to do twice as much. I got to have an extra team member just to handle all of this. And somebody's getting a cut off the top. There's complications with this. It's fascinating. Like, it's crazy fascinating. Now, there's one other piece, and I've asked you about this many times, and I'll just ask you to revisit this. It's estimated that half the United States doesn't go to the dentist. And then of the half that does go to the dentist, you can put, there's a reason they go to the dentist. And you can see it in this slide. They go to the dentist. Why? Why do they go to the dentist?
Well, there's a couple of reasons why they go. I mean, one is just health. They know their oral health is tied to their overall health. And we've seen that over and over and over again, right? That's number one. But number two is, even though everybody pretty much knows that, almost all of the population knows that, the reason they won't go, or should I say the reason they do go, the ones that do go, that 50% of the 50%, is because they have coverage. That is the key, is that if I have coverage, I'm much more comfortable going into the dentist. It's that simple.
Yeah. And so by having a membership plan, you're presenting the same mental stimulus where I've got something, I've got coverage, I've got a benefit of some kind, and I've got to be able to utilize that. My wife, just as we speak, my wife today is driving to Costco to get toilet paper. Like, it makes no sense. Like, she's like, nope, I got to go to Costco to get toilet. I'm like, they got toilet paper around she's like, nope, we got a membership. I'm like, I love my wife. So I'm like, okay, go for it. We feel like we've got to utilize, because this trusted membership. Is that part of what's going on here?
Absolutely. So, Kirk, my personal stories there. One is I now buy everything either at Amazon or Costco. I would bet you 90% of my purchases are through one of those two. And just yesterday, my wife was going to Costco, and it's, 3 or 4 miles from our house. We have a gas station a half a mile from our house. Mm-hmm. And she's wanted to take my car because she knew it needed gas, and she wanted to fill it up at Costco instead of the gas station. I'm like, wow. It's like, this thing's really impacted the way we buy things.
Yeah. And I would think, you think my intelligence would prevail, but like when I go to Costco, there's a line. Like, I got to get in line to get gas, and I have the same thing going on in my house. I could probably just drive right in here and fill it up, but no, there's something in my mind that says, number one, I'm probably getting better gas. Number two, I'm already a member, so I might as well utilize it. Probably no different than being, if you're a country club member, this. You've got this internal, stimulus, like, we got to use it, or else I'm going to get billed for these benefits that I'm not utilizing. So.
Another great example I give people all the time is, I always challenge people, when you go to buy something on Amazon, next time you go do it, do one extra step. Go out onto the web and just Google whatever you're trying to buy on Amazon. You're going to find other places to buy it that are cheaper. Wow. Amazon is not the cheapest, but that's outside of my subscription, right? It's outside of whatever I feel like I get, take advantage of the subscription. And it's just easier to do it with Amazon because I'm just part of that community. It's another sort of dynamic. Like, it's amazing how quickly you can get to lower price things just doing a Google search, but nobody does it. Everybody buys it through Amazon because they're committed to that subscription. Yeah,
and we could do a whole show on this, but also Amazon has employed some of the other things that make it easy for me to buy. It's risk reversal. I also know that anything I buy, I bought a Yeti cooler from Yeti. It was hell returning it. Now I'm like, I still buy Yetis, but I only buy them from Amazon because it's easy. It's super easy. And I feel safe. My credit card is in one place. at least most of the time. You know what I mean? So there's a lot.
Kirk, on that, so that's what we tell practices is don't think of this as a transaction. Right. Think of this as a relationship, right? So we have practices who, when a member first joins or patient first joins, they give them a little gift. It can be anything, but just show their appreciation. And then if something happens, and let's say, the patient is upset about something or they felt like they got overcharged, just give them a credit. Make everything super easy for them so it's convenient, simple. They never question, right, that I would ever leave this practice. I'm committed to this practice. I'm bought into the subscription. Because of that, I'm getting treated fairly and I can trust this practice.
Okay, so I want to go back to your second slide again. And I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I'm just going to say it. You're presenting data. And it makes total sense. That data, if I'm a dentist, is not easy to find. I have Dentrix trainers that I reach out to and they're like, I got to find out how. I'm like, you got to find out how to find that information. My first thought is like, is everybody in on this? Like, I don't want to create conspiracy theory, but the data you're presenting in the slide, and I'll show it again, this is not easy to find. You got to dig for this, right?
Well, we happen to have a PhD in machine learning on our team. So he's developed a bunch of algorithms to organize this data. And yeah, you're right. It is not simple. You got to go into this transaction table and practice management system and organize it in a certain way. And there's all kinds of things you got to look at to determine if it's the right data to pull or not. So it's not easy. It's a complicated process, and it is a lot of data to sift through to get to this.
All right. Analysis. So again, I got the slide up again. So just one more thing. Any last thing that you would say, like, this is obviously we're showing this today and adding some value to this today. But like, let's say I'm a 32-year-old dentist and I'm looking at this slide. Like, coach me for the next 2 decades. How do I want this slide to change over the course of my career? Give me some extra coaching on this.
Two things really stand out to me from it's just a high level. So one is you want your uninsured patients to have coverage. That's number one. They should look at the data, right? They're going to come in 50% more often. They're going to buy 3.5 or 3 times more treatment. Like, why have an uninsured patient? And now, one of the pushbacks we get every once in a while is, well, I have some of these patients will pay full fee, right? I don't want to put them on a membership plan. And we're like, don't think that way. That is a tiny percentage of your patient base. If you get your whole patient base buying 2 or 3 times more, that person who got a little bit of a discount that normally wouldn't get it, it's going to wash out. You're not even going to be thinking about it. So number one is don't have uninsured patients. Have patients with coverage through a membership plan. Number two is we see this over and over again. If you look at Kleer versus the insured patients, so you're basically doing about the same amount of work, right? The patient's coming in about the same amount of times. You're giving them about the same amount of procedures. It's taking up the same amount of assets, the resources on your team, right? Your space, your chair. So think about, and we see this over and over again. You spend about the same amount of time with the insured patients as you do with a Kleer patient, but you're going to get paid in collections twice as much for a Kleer patient than you would for an insured patient. So do the same work, but collect twice as much, right? So that's another sort of aspect of this I think jumps out at people.
Yeah, and go a little bit further in that too, because I spend a lot of my time, now you're going to help me with one of my problems here. I spend a lot of my time trying to emphasize what you just said. And a lot of dentists come back with exactly what you said is, most of my practice is fee for service. Why would I want to give away a percentage when I don't need to right now? And my thinking is this, you're going to do what's called a fee adjustment at the end of the year. You're going to take a look at what you gave away, no different than you using a really expensive lab. You're going to do the same thing. If you're using a great lab person right now, or you're using great technology that you've just implemented, you're going to adjust what your fees are to cover some of those costs of doing business. Am I thinking about that correctly or not?
Oh, absolutely. So we encourage our practices to raise their fees every year. Take a look at it, especially lately, right, with all the inflation. And patients are very open to it. So yeah, absolutely. You want to constantly look at your fees and raise them as needed. And I would get into an annual process for that. And what we've seen is no pushback from the patient. So if, let's say you increase them 3%, they get it. Things cost more, right, year over year, and we don't see any pushback. But the other thing to emphasize about that, and we can talk about it a little bit on the next slide, is that most practices think they're collecting full fee from their fee-for-service patients, but they are not. And there's typically a couple things that are happening. A lot of times they'll give them some free cleanings and exams and things to get them in the door. And a lot of those patients end up not coming back. But the other thing they do is they have discretionary discounts. They'll throw a 5% or 10% or 15% here or there. Kirk, they stack up. They become those sort of embedded discounts. You're not collecting your full fee. And I can show you that with this practice. And it was really eye-opening to them what they were actually giving away to their fee-for-service patients, not really knowing what the total giveaway was.
Yeah, and that's only what we know about, because your sister, if you're listening to this, you know your sister comes in and you don't put anything in the computer, but you prep all the uppers and the lowers, and then you're mad because you don't have any money at the end of the month. Well, we won't even go there, but we'll go. Let's talk about your third slide. So tell us what's on here if we're looking at this.
Yep. So this one's even harder to get to from a data perspective, but we tried to simplify the data. So what you're seeing is on the top of the chart, that is production at UCR. So full fee production. And it's on the bottom, you can see it's based on the coverage type of the patient. So far left, uninsured patients are producing about $1.4 million, right, of production or so. Move to the next, Delta Dental Plan of New Jersey is producing what is about $1 million, right? So you can see that and you can read that on the bottom. I'll explain sort of what the graph ends up telling us, but that's production on the top. On the bottom is the percent off of the UCR that was collected. So for example, the uninsured are they're producing almost 1.4 million, but the discount or the percent of that they're collecting of UCR is about 55%. So if there was a procedure that an uninsured patient accepted that was $100, they were only collecting $55 of that $100 from the patient. So what we're trying to get to is it's not just about production, right? That really at the end of the day does not matter. The question is, how much did you actually collect? How much actually went into your bank, right? And what's really interesting is when you look at that across the different coverage plans that a practice is involved with, you start to see very different results. And Kirk, you were talking about in the beginning, I'm not here to bash PPOs, right? That's not our goal. What our goal is to show everybody data so that you understand what you're getting yourself involved with and what you can expect moving forward from different types of plans. And so that's what this is trying to do. And what we're trying to get to is, hey, some of them might be behaving well for your practice and there's no reason to move away from them, but some might be really damaging your practice. And you need to understand that and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite the mathematician that you are, but I could look at this graph, it's on the screen right now, and just put a line down the middle and go, let's not do anything to the right at all. I don't know that it's even benefiting us on any level. And I might even go a little bit further, because I'll have to take your graph and take the first line, which is your uninsured patients, and then take the Kleer. And if we put those on top of it, I could probably cut back a day less of dentistry, probably make more money. And it goes back to your whole point. Like, you got to take a look at this stuff because you don't know. And in all fairness to dentists, they just don't know. They keep working and it gets busier. And then you're also fighting your main enemy, which is an empty chair. Like every dentist, their number one enemy is an empty chair because they know it's not no profit, it's negative profit, which is, this self-talk in your brain. But I think that data is crazy important. What else have you learned when you're looking at this data?
So let's go through this. So I'll tell you, if I look at this graph, what sort of reaction do I have? And sort of how do we talk to practices about it? So the far left, the uninsured patients, great production, right? They're doing a good job on the production side, but they're just not collecting the money from these patients. And we were asked, we're like, why is that? Like, typically uninsured will have a higher percent collected, but we asked them what's going on. They do the classic free exam, free cleaning, free x-rays, right, to get the patient in the door. And what happens to those patients, Kirk? They don't come back. So You're giving away a lot of treatment for free. So that's going to impact your total percentage discount for your uninsured. The second thing they do is what I talked about before, discretionary discounts. So they give their team members up to 20% discretionary discount. And so what do team members do? They give it away every day, all day.
Wow.
Right? And so those two things are killing them. We're like, you should probably change that behavior, right? So let's try to stop that. Then you look at, just look across the PPOs for a second. And you can see that line down at the bottom, right at 60%. We drew a line there just as a benchmark. And what we've heard from practices, and this is going to change depending on your overhead and the cost of running your practices, a lot of practices felt if I could collect over 60% of my UCR under a PPO, I would be profitable. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I would guess it's got to might be above 70%, but the net is we drew the line at 60, just give you a benchmark. Now look at any PPO that does not touch that line is a problem, right?
Right.
So let's pick one. Right in the middle, Liberty Dental Plan, right? They collect about 43% of their UCR. What's the chance of that being profitable?
Zero. None.
Zero. No chance. Zero. Right.
You're probably waiting on that money if you're collecting any of it too, right?
Oh yeah, the delays in the payments are crazy. So you look at that. You look at Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, right? You look at Delta Dental of Wisconsin. Not sure why that's in this practice, but somebody brought it in. United Concordia. All of these are a problem, right? Now, to your point about filling the chair, I wouldn't say go drop these like right away, right? Let's have a plan, right? Let's think about this. So go further to the right, right? And you look at United Healthcare, tiny production. Look how small that production is, but they're only collecting roughly 50%. That's probably a problem as well. My feedback to the team would be, let's start with United and let's drop them, right? It's not going to impact your chair time a whole lot, right? And your production. It's only a tiny percentage of your production. Let's see if we can fill those chairs with some patients with the more profitable, right, collections.
Yeah.
And start there, learn from that. If everything goes well, you feel comfortable with it, then let's move to the next one. But let's do this in steps, not in some radical way. And it's just taking the data, looking at it, making sure what makes sense for your practice, and just move forward and improving as you go along.
Yeah, I love it. And you guys, if you're listening, Dave and his team, it's extremely thoughtful. One of the steps that you have in your PPO playbook is proactively reach out to these patients and communicate with them so that they don't just hear it for the first time when they're calling to make an appointment or they get a letter going, oh, you dropped us. You're proactively communicating because you want in hopes of keeping these people long term. So it breaks the mold of, oh, just drop them and let these patients figure it out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the support you provide your patients is critical. If they value good quality care, right, they're going to end up staying with you. And plus, if you position it properly, which is, you can still use your insurance here, right? It's just reimbursements happen differently. If you help them do that and walk them through it and give them support around that, you can keep quite a few of those patients. So it's not like they're all going to go running. You just got to manage it properly, communicate well, and then support them as needed as you move through that.
Right. Now, the thing that's not on your last graph, which is it's like it stops you in your tracks when you're looking at this graph. But what's not on your graph is the volatility of people on these plans. In today's workforce, conditions have changed for your employees. So you're talking how many, let me go back to the other slide. So you're talking about a lot of patients. So let's say 5,632 patients, a significant percentage of them, I hate this term, in the Great Resignation have changed jobs, but they still live in your community. They still drive by your practice. So you're presenting more of a predictable option for them, even when their conditions change. What's the data show on your side of things with 5,600 patients?
Yeah, so that we're seeing, the stats are showing like 20% of people are part of that Great Resignation and moving from, sort of position to position. And yeah, you're right. Their coverage is going to be in flux. If it even, a lot of them are, sort of working independently. So they're going to not have coverage. So at a high level, we've seen about 20 or 30 million people move off of insurance during this whole craziness of COVID and the resignation, the Great Resignation, all that good stuff. So you're going to have more and more people be uninsured. Or be in flux in between positions that want coverage. So absolutely, they're perfect patients to offer a membership plan to.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, I want you to speak to is you want to present options, take away, restrictions from people coming to your office. Like we're presenting this. And so if you're a fee-for-service dentist and this is the first time you've heard it or the 10th and you're still considering it, remember the DSOs are now offering their own membership plans because they understand this data and probably look at it more than we do in some respects. And so you want the stickiness of your office to be there, even if you don't participate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with some DSOs as well, and they're getting more and more aggressive on this front. In the past, they've actually offered a lot of discount plans, but they're now moving to membership plans, understanding the better dynamics for the practice and the better dynamics for the patient. Yeah. So absolutely, you're going to see more and more of these coming up through the DSOs, and they get the idea that they have a lot of issues typically with turnover of patients. So they know that this makes their patients stickier. That's really, at the end of the day, what DSOs are really after, actually, as part of these plans, is to get the patients coming more often. And they're really interested in that treatment revenue outside of the subscription. That's what they're most interested in. They understand that. And by the way, Kirk, so they typically will have somebody in the background, either an operating person or an investment person, who gets this model. They've seen it, they understand it, and they want to put it into their organization.
Yeah, and I'll leave there's so many benefits to this, and I'll leave you with one as we get ready to wrap this up. But like, I don't care if you're a young dentist or you're a mature dentist. At some point, you're going to have to sell your practice. And if I'm looking at this graph, the last one, and you've built an incredible group or segment of your patients that are uninsured or even insured at a little bit of level, and you've got a lot of membership patients, those are real patients that are coming in on a regular basis. So as a buyer, that makes it a very attractive entity instead of somebody that's on a ton of plans in which the rules can change a lot once I purchase this practice. And you can also speak to this. The rules of the purchaser don't always apply that the rules of the seller had in some of these agreements in PPOs, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And Kirk, coming back to that value piece, so investors will, on average, will pay 5 times more for a business that has recurring revenue versus one that does not.
Why?
And why? There's 2 reasons, and they're related. One is you have guaranteed revenue, right? So just think about a business where I can guarantee you next year we'll have this much revenue. That's, I'm going to put value on that. And what does that mean? It means less risk. Less risk means higher value, right? And so these businesses, once you start to build up the subscription, if you go to sell your practice, you're going to get a premium on that recurring revenue.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. And Dave, I could probably ask you 10 more questions, but I got to respect your time. And I'm going to keep having you back as I get little pieces of inside information. Like, I love it when they show me those slides. I'm like, the data is incredible. So again, let's go back and revisit this. Number one, the whole purpose of this show is just to make your practice better. You have to understand the coverage options in your practice. That's number one. Number two, let's take a look at the data and the performance. You've really got to understand what this data means to your practice. And then number three, how do we take a look at patients' behavior and dispel some of the myths and see what's really happening? And when you can put all 3 of those together, it paints a pretty good picture of what your treatment plan's got to look like for the next year or so. So I love this. Dave, I know people are going to be wanting to find out more about Kleer. I'm just going to say this, you guys. If you haven't done anything with Kleer, do something with Kleer. These guys are world-class organization. And again, many things that I appreciate. One of them is the care that you guys provide, but the education is phenomenal. So if I'm listening, how do I find out more about what you guys do, Dave, and how do I get started? Oh, and one more thing, I didn't find this out until recently. You guys actually offer a discount for people that are listening. I mean, we've been doing these for a while, and then finally, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So how do I get started on this?
Yeah, so a couple questions there. So go up to Kleer.com, Kleer.com, Kleer.com. And there's an area up there. I mean, you learn more, got a lot of content up there, but you can book a demo. Typically, demos 30 minutes. You can see the practice. I mean, see the platform in practice, and then you can also, it's a live demo, so you can talk to somebody and get your questions answered. So that's the way to get started. And yeah, all ACT members, all your customers, we pull you guys together into one pool, and you get discounts based on the volume of members that are being added to the platform. There's a scale of discounts for that. So yeah, we give you guys a discount of your membership within ACT Dental.
Yeah, you're crazy not to consider it. Try it. Get it going. Oh, and one last thing is, you got to make it work in order for it to work. You can't just try it for a month and go, hey, we had 3 people on it, didn't work. No, once you get to 100, you're going to go, wow, this really works. You get to 300, you go, it really, really works. And when you get to 500, you go, I should have done this a long time ago. And things are more predictable. Dave, I just can't thank you enough for jumping on and helping us with this. And you and I are going to do many, many more of these. Stick around while I say goodbye to everybody else. But thank you guys for listening to the Best Practices Show. If you enjoyed today, which I know you did, just do us a favor. Hit the share button, share with your friends. I'll tell you what, I'm going to have Dave back again and again and again because he's just a great teacher. If there's something you want to know, send it to us. I'll reach out to him and go, Dave, got a problem. Dave's good at solutions. So we'll bring him back in. And until we see you guys next time, or you hear from us next time, keep watching the Best Practices Show. You guys enjoy the rest of your day.